One of the biggest questions we always get is how to prepare for going from one kid to two kids. People are really freaked out about that transition. And every time somebody asks us that, we always get in this debate of what is actually harder, the transition from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 2. We're going to debate that in this episode. This is the Balanced Family Podcast with Ben
and Jessica. There's a lot to balance when you have a family: marriage, kids, health, career, while you're trying to balance all the opinions out there on how to do things right.
Today, we'll cut through the noise, tackle hard questions, and share stories as we try to get to the heart of the things that really matter. All right, this one's pretty straightforward, Jessica, and we haven't debated this in a while.
Yeah.
I am interested to hear your analysis of both. Which transition was harder for you, going from 0 to 1 kids or 1 to 2?
I would say for me personally, although 0 to 1 was a big life shift, 1 to 2 was hard because of some contexts in my life that I can describe more. Do you want me to describe it now? Why?
Yeah,
1 to 2?
I guess in this episode, we're just going right into the topic. Let's do it.
I think so. 0 to 1 was definitely hard for me, and I definitely had some struggle, but I would say 1 to 2 was difficult because of a few things. Number one, I had my second baby when my first was not even 2 yet. So Journey would have been 21 months, I think. So almost 2. Mm-hmm. And I had a C-section. So that's another really important thing to discuss, is that the recovery for Millie was a lot harder. Number 3, I went back to work, but that just was very different with having 2 kids. And then number 4, Millie was very colicky, woke up, did not sleep well at all for especially the first 4 months. So I was a stay-at-home mom. Also, Millie was born in January. That's another important thing. There's a lot of reasons why 1 to 2 is so hard, because this is why, okay? In January, when you have a baby in the winter, you have cold and flu season. So you don't want to get out a ton necessarily. It's also really cold. And so it's not fun to have to load up 2 kids in the cold to go do stuff. There's not a whole lot that you can do outside. So you don't have that natural thing that you can go do, your go-to, which was usually for me was going out to a park. Mm-hmm. That was my go-to. If we were having a bad day, load them up in the car, go to the park. I did that with both 0 to 1, and then when we did 2 to 3, when we transitioned
go on a walk, just anything like that, out of the house.
It was I would have to go indoors, but then there was cold and flu season. I was also recovering from a C-section, and I think I had some breastfeeding issues. There was just so much going on in that kind of January to May time period that that was by far the hardest for me. Also, our firstborn, how do I put this? When she hit about 18 months old, she got very strong-willed. She was a very intense toddler. And so that also was very difficult for me. So yeah. So that, is that enough for you, Ben? I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm always so interested to revisit that from your vantage point, because from my perspective, if I was to watch you from the outside, I would have said the opposite, that your first child, that was such a bigger change. You've never given birth before. You've never breastfed before. You've never done any of that before. And I just think that that's interesting to hear your perspective in that. And from my vantage point, it was always I just remember that first one, that transition being really hard. But I felt and this kind of transitions to what I would say.
What would you say?
My experience, was that they're just so different. It's honestly hard to really, for me personally, to say which one was harder. I feel like the transition from 0 to 1 was harder mentally, because you don't know anything.
Yeah,
everything you know is from taken world-class online courses from people like Balanced Families.
Okay, shameless plug. Oh my gosh, that's funny.
But so you might have taken a course, you might have read books. Which we did too.
Yeah.
You might have read books and all that jazz, but there's just nothing that prepares you for the actual experience. And I just remember you and I constantly just what does that cry mean? What does that hiccup mean? What is this? Is this okay? Is this safe? Can they take this product? You know, it was just like that constant mental burden of trying to figure out every little thing and if it's safe. And I felt like the transition from 1 to 2 didn't have that. It was like you knew what to expect from my vantage point.
But you have to remember, I stayed home. So I was a teacher, and I had Millie in January, and then I actually did not go back to teaching until later on that summer, like in July, I think it was. So I actually had a lot of time off,
Yeah.
and I was a full-time stay-at-home mom after that. And I think that also might be why it was so hard, because Millie would have been almost 7 or 8 months by the time, or 6 months ish. I don't know how old she was, but she was older when I actually started back at work. And so, whereas I started back at work with Journey when she was 10 weeks old. So very different experience when you have childcare. I don't know. And then like with the C-section and just all the things. Of course, now also we know like Millie was sick. We didn't know that at the time. But she was there was a lot of crying. Everyone was crying. I was crying. Journey was crying. Millie was crying. We were all crying because it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't think you had the surface area on the family as much as I did.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why you have a different experience.
Right.
You know, it makes sense.
Well, let me share more about my experience, and then I'll share more about why I have this vantage point. I'm not saying my vantage point on you is right. I'm just saying that was always in my mind, and I'll explain what I mean. For me, the transition from 1 to 2 was physically demanding. Yeah. I remember that, and I wasn't even the one breastfeeding and going through postpartum, but I just remember like not only did I become the primary caregiver for our oldest child, which happens a lot in couples, is dad takes care of the older kid, and she was a toddler and stuff. I was definitely the primary caregiver for her, like in that period. But then also I was trying to support you with postpartum. I was waking up, helping with feedings and all that jazz. And I remember like that's when I was tired, the transition from 0 to 1. But like
you could switch off though. Like one of us could get a break easily.
Yes.
There was no break with 1 to 2.
Like I never want to like play down that transition from 0 to 1 when people are like, you're like, how's it going with your first baby? Oh, so tired. You just want to be like, dude, you don't know fatigue until you got a litter of them running around.
Well, and let me also say too, there's a big difference between waiting to have your second many years later and having your second as close as we did.
Yeah.
I think that's also like, so like I said, I feel like it is contextual. I don't feel like that what I'm saying is like transferable to even other people, because there was so much context around my experience that was why it was hard.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
If we had an older kid, like if Journey had been like 4, could you imagine what the transition 1 to 2 would have been?
It would have been way different.
Yeah.
I just remember like coming home from work and like going and hanging out with Journey and like meeting her needs, playing with her and stuff. And then there would be times I would literally like just like lay in her floor in her room and just crash.
You would.
Which was funny because Journey, ever since she was an infant and could walk, and especially when she was a toddler, she loved whenever I would lay down on my stomach on the floor and she would just sit on top of me and just bounce up and down. She could do that for like an hour. She just thought it was so funny. So she would just get on top of Daddy and just be like, and be laughing. And I'd just be like, it was almost like therapeutic, like this
like
massage
weird, like
or chiropractic
sensory input.
It's just like, if this entertains you, whatever, man. This
At least
is great.
I can lay down. Yeah.
You know, but I remember like getting books and just like trying to read a book to her and just being like, oh my gosh. I can't. And Journey has energy.
Still
so
to this day.
It's just like another book. Wake up, Dad.
Let's go.
Oh yeah. And so, but I just remember the physical exhaustion more than the mental exhaustion going from 1 to 2. So I think if I had to choose to answer this question, if I had to choose, I would also choose, like you're saying, the transition from 1 to 2 being harder. And just for that fact,
That's surprising. I actually thought you were going to say 0 to 1, but
well, again, they're different. The 0 to 1, definitely mentally, I remember just feeling so out of my element. Everything's so new. I don't know. And what I mean is, like, from a husband, like, it was hard because you were always just like, I don't know what to do. Like,
very bewildered.
very bewildered. I remember baby sleep,
Confused.
especially,
Oh my gosh,
was
yes.
like such this like thing that we struggled with and trying to figure out what we wanted to do.
And it's like jokes on us because then we had our second and she like didn't sleep. And by that point I was just like, screw it. I don't even care. Like
Yeah.
whatever. Like I'm just going to wake up all night with her because it's just
Yeah,
like you become more apathetic about certain things when you realize
Yeah.
like, oh, it just ends up working itself out eventually.
And that's
you
what I
know?
mean in that later on mentally with having your second kid, there's just things you just realize are
You're
not
like,
a
that's
big
really
deal.
not a
You're
big
just
deal.
like,
Yeah.
Like when you have your first kid, you're analyzing everything to death and you just think they're all about to die, at any moment. So
And you feel like if you don't get it right, like then it's gone. It's over.
Yeah.
Like game over. You are a terrible parent and there's no way you can ever repair.
Yeah.
And it's like I learned like, oh yeah, that really just doesn't matter. And
yeah, like if you're, you see a lot of parents that are perfectionists and really hard on themselves and just like wanting to do everything right. By the time you start having multiple kids, that is don't fly.
No,
you start to realize like ain't nobody grading you,
which I think
and
is
you just got to get through it.
well, and I think that's why 1 to 2 was so hard was that I had to come to grips with the fact that like I literally can't do it all. Like
Yeah.
I tell this story, but like I will never forget this moment I had. Millie was a freshie. She was a newborn. Journey. I think maybe I had tried to potty train Journey early again. Like why? Like now I know better.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
why did I even try to potty train her at 18 months? It's so stupid. Or so no, that would have been 18 months, but Journey was doing something with the potty. I can't remember. And like, I was like, I need to go like make sure that Journey's not wiping poop all over the walls. Like there was like this like understanding of like something really bad is probably happening right now. Cause she was really quiet, which was abnormal for her.
When a kid's quiet, that's bad.
But Millie was like screaming in her little like bouncy chair. And I remember panicking and just being like, what do I do? Because I knew when I was going to go see Journey, I was going to need 2 hands. Like I didn't need I couldn't like hold Millie and with toddlers, when they throw fits and have tantrums, Journeys especially were very physical. And so there was actually like a risk of her like hurting Millie really bad. So there would be times when I would literally have to be like, I need to go take care of Journey right now in her tantrum and all the things that she was doing. And I can't bring Millie with me. Millie was screaming. And I remember like that feeling of, I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I now like, this is now a lose-lose situation. And I never had that before, because with Journey, it's like, oh, you are crying. Let me meet your need.
Yeah.
Let me immediately problem solve for you. And then it was like, oh my gosh, I can't be in 2 places at once. And I remember just thinking like, okay, I'm pretty sure Journey pooped, and I'm pretty sure like I just like had this
Probably
feeling.
playing with it.
Yeah. And I was like, Millie, I got to go. So like I like patted Millie. I tried to give her passy, and I ran in to go take care of Journey. And she was on the potty. I don't think she had pooped at that point, but then I ran back and got Millie. But it was that moment for me that I think is why it's like frozen in my mind. I'll never forget it, because it was this moment where I actually did change. I like transformed as a mother into this. I no longer can try to micromanage and control everything. And now I'm actually going to have to make decisions that are hard, and because I can't do it all. And it was like this like crisis for me internally. And like, that's why I think it was so hard, is because no longer could I do it all.
Yeah. Somebody is going to have to be left crying
Somebody's
for a little
going to
bit.
have to be crying. And sometimes I would leave Journey crying, and I would go tend to Millie. Like it wasn't like, I only tended to one. It was like I had to make decisions. That was hard. For my mama heart, it was hard.
Right. It makes me think of, I remember a friend of mine, she had twins, and I remember like for her profile pic or something, it was like this perfect capture where the twins, and they were identical twins, they were both just like melting down and crying, and they looked like just like in the identical mood, and she like snapped a picture. It was like such a good capture. And I just remember thinking like, I'm so glad I didn't have twins.
So it's all you twin moms out there, we much respect, okay?
Yeah, the twin moms are listening. They're like, dude,
They're like,
yeah,
0
we
to
had
2. Come on
0
now.
to 2. Come
Like,
on, dude.
small
Yeah,
potatoes.
They're like, yeah, we had to make those kind of tough choices
All the time.
all the time. But that actually brings me up to one of the points I wanted to make about this whole debate, and just trying to like give couples resourceful information, is that every kid is different.
Yes.
And so, like, you legitimately might have an easier baby, your second baby,
Or your first baby,
or your first baby, which
then makes the 1 to 2 even harder.
even harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you have that, like we had like kind of more of the colicky baby second, where things were really unpredictable. Because we look back at our first and it was like everything was new and it was stressful, but actually like she was pretty standard.
We
baby.
made mountains out of molehills.
She was pretty standard baby.
She was a standard baby.
Mountains out of molehills. You know, I remembered so many times that we would have questions for parent. I just remember when you get that look from like an older parent, they just look at you like, yeah, dude, you're good. Like,
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I laugh though, because if you notice, we aren't even talking about the transition from 2 to 3.
Oh, well, that's off the charts.
Because, and I'm just laughing because it's like,
We don't want to traumatize people.
no, actually, but here's the thing is 2 to 3. I love what Jim Gaffigan says is it's like, you're already drowning and then someone just throws you a baby. And it's just like, take care of this. And it's like, things are already so chaotic. And you now have gotten into this mode of complete chaos and just being used to it and kind of living in it. And so then you add a third and it's just like, let's go. Like it does not, the transition from 2 to 3 was so much easier. Even with like our third, when COVID hit, she was a year and a half old roughly, you know, and like it was still like so much easier than 1 to 2, in my opinion.
Maybe we'll have to just change this episode to talk about the transition.
I'm just laughing because we didn't even talk about it.
I just disagree. I felt like.
Did you feel like 2 to 3 was hardest?
I felt like 2 to 3 took me even over the edge of more exhaustion. And I feel like that everything was a logistical nightmare.
Well, because you're playing zone, you're not playing man to man.
Right. You're playing zone. Yeah. So it was like, it wasn't like,
it's like,
I mean, honestly, it was a logistical nightmare.
but listen,
like,
I stayed home and I am personally saying like, I don't know, like that was when I definitely started feeling a lot better about my motherhood journey. Like things started clicking for me because it was just already, I had embraced the chaos. And Josie was also really easy, which is typical of third babies. Like they tend to be kind of more go with the flow and flexible. And I don't know, I just kind of rolled with it. So
I try, like, I'm trying to respect your vantage point, and I do believe you. I'm just saying it's hard because I remember how hard that season was on YouTube.
Oh yeah, no, I know. But like, I'm talking, and everything we're talking about is us looking back on it.
Yeah, we're both probably.
So if I think like I'm
remember.
talking about like how I feel about each of those seasons right now,
yeah.
And I remember even thinking when after we had Josie, like this is crazy, but like this is so much like when I had Millie, it honestly all feels like I don't even really remember a whole lot. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I like pushed back memories because it was so. I think maybe I had some postpartum depression. I don't know, but like it feels very dark to me and very just kind of like. Ugh. And then 2 to 3 is just like, let's go. My life is crazy. I don't know.
You might have kind of a rosy view, but no.
Maybe I do.
But maybe just what you're describing is like you can struggle externally and you can struggle internally.
Right.
And I think after our second, you struggled a lot more like internally. But I just remember, I mean, it was just like the car seat. Oh, the car seats. Like what do you just the juggling and the moving and the car seats.
Like our kids can buckle themselves up right now, and it's glorious.
Yeah, and just like
the gymnastics of getting everyone buckled.
There was a period where would there have been a period where all three were in diapers of some sort?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. You know me, my memory. I can't do math on this kind of stuff. Like
no, Journey wasn't night trained. That was So
okay,
yes.
so there was. So yeah, like that's what I'm talking about, Jess. Like all 3 kids with diapers, just like the messes, just like the crying, just like it was. I just remember my exhaustion hit a new level. But I would say just like describing that transition from 1 to 2, my capacity was just larger, like mentally to like carry it all. And in general, like your capacity grows as you have kids, which before I forget, we have a quote at the end we're going to read about that.
That's true.
Anyway, now people with like more than 3 kids, they're like, you don't even know.
No, actually, I have heard, because I have friends who have
Yeah.
4+ kids, and they all are like, it's really easy after that. Because then you have kids that are old enough to help.
Yeah.
So there's this then reciprocal thing that starts happening where, and honestly, like if we didn't have some of the like concerns that we have with like some genetic health conditions and whatnot, like that our kids can potentially have, like if we didn't have that concern, I think I actually would love to have 4 kids.
Yeah.
But there's just this level of like, you just kind of, if you have 3, you might as well have 4. And
Yeah.
but then I think after 4, then you have to then consider actually changing what you drive. There's like a lot more logistical considerations that you have once you go past 4. So anyway, these are all debates that I know people have.
We always originally intended to have 4.
And I think what I actually really enjoy about this conversation that we've had so far is I remember really, when I was a new mom, really loving hearing couples that were a couple stages ahead of me talk about their parenting journey, because it helped put things into perspective for me. Because when I was feeling really overwhelmed or really exhausted, and sometimes I would kind of compare and like look at more seasoned moms and be like, oh my gosh, like they're, just handling things so well.
Yeah.
Like I'm over here like failing miserably. I'm so stressed out. And then I would hear them talk about they're like, they would talk about some of this stuff, like which transition was harder. And almost all of them would either say 0 to 1 or 1 to 2, even if they had 4 kids and were way further along. Like it helped me feel better about that. And also there's like Instagram influencers, who have like 8 kids,
1 million kids,
and I
that
listen
they're
to
filming nonstop.
Right. Well, and there's one though that I really love, and she doesn't film her kids, and that makes me happy. But she did talk about how like she has 8 kids. I think she just had her 9th maybe. And she said that no question at all, the hardest stage was 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. She said after she got past her 3rd kid, like things just kept getting easier and easier and easier and easier.
Yeah.
It's more logistically difficult, but like she just said those first few years were just so hard.
Yeah.
So that made me feel better, right? And so I don't know, hopefully maybe this conversation will make some of you guys just kind of know like, hey, like this is kind of, the season.
Well, and a lot of those moms with like a lot of kids, I mean, they've like tapped into like the right perspective.
Right. Well, yeah.
And
right.
and it's just like, this is what we do. And we raise babies, and it's everybody pitches in, and it's work. But they see the joy.
And they have older kids then. I mean, by that point that you're having 12, 13, 14-year-olds who are helping out, and that's very helpful.
Yeah. But they see the joy in it.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
You don't meet any of them and they're just like, oh my God. You know what I'm saying? Like they really see the value in kids and building their family. And I feel like we really started to tap into that eventually as well, to where, and I say this a lot to parents that are about to have their second. I'm like, it is double the work, but it's double the reward. And I feel like that it exponentially grows over time. Like, I'm so glad that we have 3 kids. I wouldn't have wanted it. And I'm not saying that's better than anybody that doesn't have 3 kids. I'm just saying, I'm just like so glad that we have these kids in the world, and it does get fun. It's fun to build a family. It's definitely hard there in the beginning, but it's like children are a joy and they're a blessing.
So I think to end this, we'll maybe just share a few little practical things that can be helpful for 0 to 1 and then 1 to 2. So I would say for 0 to 1, I think it is all about perspective. And so maybe, like I was saying earlier, like hearing our conversation, hearing our reflection on how we made a lot of mountains out of molehills might help you if you just had a baby, just to kind of know. And I think just like kind of knowing like, okay, I'm feeling really, stressed out about this particular thing. Like, what if I were to take a bigger picture perspective and ask myself, like, is this really going to matter in a year?
Right, yeah.
And recognizing that you don't have to make everything so complicated. I feel like in this day and age, there's so many, clickbait Instagram posts of like how you're ruining your child. or all the things you should be doing, baby-led weaning. And if you don't, feed them solids in the right order, then they're going to never develop their gut microbiome. And I mean, it's just like literally quoting like actual things that I see.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Okay. Like let's stop complicating parenthood
Yeah.
so much. And so if you're in that season and you're just kind of maybe majoring on a lot of things that are kind of minor, like maybe take a step back, and especially if it's not bringing you joy, if it's causing stress, if it's
Right.
causing anxiety, take a step back and just kind of take a deep breath and be like, okay, like what are the things that really matter right now,
Mm-hmm.
And then put effort in those and maybe let other things kind of work themselves out, because they will.
Yeah.
Your kid's going to eventually learn how to do all the things that they need to learn because you're a good parent and you guys are both going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be some practical advice for 0 to 1. Do you
Yeah.
have anything to add or anything about 1 to 2?
Well, I would just say for 1 to 2, because I don't know why it feels like we get asked that a lot. But preparing your firstborn, like getting them in the right frame of mind to that they're a part of the family, getting them involved and helping baby, making them feel valued so they don't feel, neglected is always important. And I would also say, one thing that helped with us is just like we're very into routines,
Yeah.
flexible routines.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when you really tap into that well with your first kid, when you have your second kid, you got to really lean on that even more. And same thing with just like sharing the load, because we shared the load and I was involved, and I think sometimes it's tempting when you have some people have really easy babies and a lot of your systems aren't as important. But like that's one thing that helps us, because when you have good routines, and like you can actually break the routines more often and it not bring disaster upon.
What would be a routine that you think that we built that was
just
helpful?
like naps, like we like had a system and we set the environment well. Like our kids relied on good nap times, and we accepted the stage of life we were in, and we just kind of put boundaries around ourselves. So if there was a situation where we had to stay up later, we had to travel, we had to do something different, like it was just a little bit easier on the kids because most days they had those routines.
Yeah,
you think
that's
that's
true.
a good example?
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think like I get a lot of questions with mom. They're like, what do I do if I have to put my toddler down for a nap, but I'm like nursing or whatever? And like, that would be like an example of why a good nap routine is so important.
Yeah.
So by the time even Journey was 2, like we had a good nap schedule. She was taking one nap and was consistently taking a nap and would stay in her bed
Yeah.
during said nap, which is
crazy.
important.
Yeah.
But it's important because
Exactly.
parents struggle with that. This
yeah.
whole issue of like not disciplining your kids when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like,
Yeah.
honestly. So that would be like an example of like, we had built this really solid expectation and routine around nap time. And so I would often have her read a book with me while I was nursing Millie. And then I would literally baby wear Millie, or sometimes even hold Millie in one hand and put Journey down for her nap and with the other hand,
Yeah.
and then leave the room. Like I would close the door and I would leave the room and she would sleep.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. But that took time and a lot of effort to build in that system and that routine that then allowed that part, at least of the transition from 1 to 2, to be a little bit simpler.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why people struggle with putting boundaries around their kids so much, even at a young age. Like our kids weren't scarred. They didn't hate, they actually liked being in their bed, and
They love routine. They love consistency.
yeah. And it was just like, that was built in moments of sanity for us when we had 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy. I totally forgot about just how we did. Yeah. I mean, and then when we had 3 kids, it was the same thing. There was always, now nap needs didn't always line up developmentally with where they're at. But I mean, for a large chunk of time, even with 3 kids, there was like at least one point in the day
Where all 3 of them were down.
where it was quiet.
Yep.
And
And as our
you
older
and I
one
were
got
able to
older,
exhale a little bit.
well, and then as our older one got older, she had quiet time.
Yeah.
So it was during
That's right.
nap time, but she was not allowed to come out of her room. She could quietly read books or play, but her door had to be closed. Like I was not going to be entertaining her during that time because I had entertained her, the rest of the day. She wasn't being deprived of anything at that point. And actually, in fact, she needed that quiet time. So that's another example of like things to think about, routines if you're pregnant with your second and you have your first and maybe you just have kind of gone with the flow and you haven't really thought through routines or systems. Like start thinking through that and start building some of that like into your home now so that then when you have a newborn, you're able then to kind of lean on that and it not be so stressful.
Mm-hmm. Well, that tees us up well for next week when we're going to talk about baby sleep. A little more in depth. But I wanted to end with this quote. Don't make fun of me, Jessica. It's a quote by Joan Rivers.
Oh, okay.
Out of Good Housekeeping.
Were you reading Good Housekeeping?
I was not. It was in my news magazine. They have like a quote, inspiring quote section.
Don't lie. I know you're reading the news magazine, but like inside of it is Good Housekeeping. I know it is.
Which it's funny that
actually that's not true because Ben would never read that magazine.
It's like still a magazine? I don't even know. Man, it's crazy.
I'm pretty sure.
You don't see a lot of magazines anymore. Of course, I read this in a magazine. But anyway, I thought that this was a great quote. She said, "I wish I could tell you it gets better, but it doesn't get better. You get better." Mm-hmm. And I think that is like the best way to encapsulate the journey of parenthood. Parenthood never gets quote unquote easy. It gets physically easier, definitely, when you finally sleep. But like what's more important is your capacity expands.
Yeah.
And then you start to see, I can do this. Like I can have a home full of kids and you grow. And that's the beauty of parenthood.
It is the beauty. So, all right. Well, I hope that was helpful. Took maybe a few little nuggets out of there. We should talk about even more things to do with this. And baby sleep is a big one. And yeah, we're going to tackle that next week. So be sure you tune in. I know that's a hot topic and you've gotten a little glimpse of our view on that. So we'll expand a little bit more next week. See you later. Thank you so much for listening today. It would mean so much to us if you left a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you heard this.
And let us know your thoughts on today's episode by leaving a comment on Spotify or YouTube, where you can also watch these episodes.